Okay, well, let's get started. My name is Trisha Thomas. I'm a partner here at Fourlane, and thank you all for joining me today. Today, my topic is around bill payments, but I want to talk to you more about not just the processing of bills, but about the AP role and the functions of your AP person. So now on today's topic, as I told you guys, yes, it is around the processing of bill payments, but I feel like there's a lot more to an AP role than just processing bill payments. So I really want to talk to you guys about AP role and talking about the accuracy and the data entry, some internal controls that we should have in place, talking about payments, timing, terms, and then of course we're always going to look at reporting. So let me hop over to my sample file and let's just kind of talk about the AP role itself. So again, as I told you, kind of that AP role, they have a lot. They kind of wear a lot of hats because yes, it is paying bills and entering bills, but you have to think about when they're doing these processes, we need to make sure that there's compliance. You know, we are looking at fraud prevention, internal controls, efficiency matters. So how many AP people do we need to make sure that we are keeping up with the number of bills that are coming in? We need to build vendor relationships. So you think about when there's an issue with a statement or an issue with a bill, that AP person has to reach out to that vendor. So it's very important that they have good vendor relationships and of course, financial accuracy. Okay, so now let's kind of just dive in there. So I'm going to take us to our vendor center. Okay, so again, let me get rid of this guy here. So our AP person will probably live in the vendor center. You can see that you've got your list of active vendors. You can see over here, you've got some balance. You can decide what you want so you can customize those columns. So if there's something different that you want to see, these are all of your different options for your columns, and you can add those over so that you can see. Okay, and then over here on the right hand side is information about the vendor that's selected. So in this case, I've got this vendor selected. We've got the information about their billing, their phone number, all the kind of setup on the vendor. I always like to show this. This is something people sometimes don't realize that there is. Set up in here, you want to set up your payment settings. So what is your payment terms with the vendor? Again, the more data we put in here, the more it's going to help us be more efficient with our time. So we're not having to select the term every time we enter a bill. If this is a 1099 vendor, of course, we want to put that in here. And then this is a good efficiency. If we have the same GL account every single time, so for example, a rent bill, we can actually set up the default GL account. So when we go to enter a bill, it's already there for us. We don't have to choose it every time. Okay. And then, of course, we've got additional information. So we've got great reportings under vendor types. So if you want to separate your vendors, maybe you have wholesale vendors, you know, some different types. So you can run reporting when it comes to purchasing by vendor type. And then we always have custom fields. So if there is something that you want to report on that is not a standard field inside of QuickBooks, so this one, for example, says a discount available. You can create a custom field so you can run a report to see what's optional. We can make those defaults and make them required. So in this case, that discount available, we've said it's for the vendor, but we said it is not required. So you can, if you want, when they create a vendor or create a transaction, have that custom field required so that it is always filled out and you always have that available as part of your reporting. Okay, that's just kind of a setup here. Over here in the bottom is going to be the transaction details. You can see that you can filter by different types. You can filter by date ranges. You can, so lots of information that you can check out at your vendor. We've also got, if you've got different contacts, you can set up different contacts. You can create to-dos, which I think is a very cool thing to kind of, if you want to remember to reach out to a vendor, you can create a to-do. Any notes about the vendor? What's really great about this is you can pin a note. So if there's a very important note, you can pin it and it will be up here for that vendor. And of course, this is our activity. So when we send anything such as like a purchase order to a vendor, it will populate here. And then this is if we have items that we purchase from this vendor, here's some information about them. So really great information on the vendor center that your AP person would help manage. Okay, so kind of more efficiencies and internal controls. We've got here in our preferences when it comes to bills that we can say warn us as duplicates. So we want to always know if we have already entered that bill for that same vendor. And then you can, a lot of people don't like this feature, but you can automatically apply any outstanding credits that you have with this vendor, or if you use discounts where you want them to go. Okay, so that goes to that kind of the internal controls, how we can, really help make sure that we aren't duplicating anything at our vendor bill center. Okay, so another thing, this is smaller companies, we talk about segregation of duties. So sometimes we see the person that's entering the bill should not be the person approving or signing the checks. So we want to make sure that is separate. Again, that goes to that internal controls to make sure that, it's not one person doing it all. We want to have those checks and balances in place. Okay. So I will tell you, a lot of people don't know this if you haven't used QuickBooks for a long time, but they do have an approval workflow set up in here. So you can set up approval workflows around purchase orders and bills, and kind of you can do it per vendor, per amount, anything like that. So that is in place if you want that type of internal control. So let's kind of talk about entering a bill. I'm going to walk you through that, and then we will go and pay a bill so that we can look at everything. So, and again, it's how you like to get to information. I like my home screen. This is my vendor center here, and these are all the things based on my company setup that I do at vendor level. But again, you can do the drop down if you like it here, or you can live in the vendor center. Okay, so let's go ahead and enter a bill so we can kind of talk about that. So we're going to do our city of Middlefield, and we're going to do a new transaction. Again, if you've got workflows in place with purchase orders, then we want to talk about three-way matching when it comes to the purchase order, to the item receipt, to the bill. In this case, we're just going to kind of talk about the controls that you can have in place when it comes to entering and paying the bill. Okay, so I'm going to do enter bill. So of course, this is going to be our default. If the address was set up, it's going to populate the address. Again, I've got POs attached to this vendor. I'm going to say no for this example. You're going to enter the date of the bill. You're going to enter the bill reference number and the bill amount. And then this is going to play when it comes to the payment terms. When are we going to pay this? So in this case, the default is set up to due upon receipt. If this was a specialized bill and I wanted to change that, I can change to net 30, and you see it updated the bill due date. Okay. If we are going to offer discounts, we can put in a discount date so we know again how soon do we need to pay it to get that discount. And of course, this is classes if we want to classify our transaction at our financial level for this expense. A bill has two options, a little bit different than an invoice. So we can enter an expense, or we can actually enter an item. So an item is going to be your active item list. The item setup tells the database what GLs to use, or if we do an expense, this is going to be the actual GL accounts. We can add a memo. We can link it to a customer. So the purpose of that would be in our job costing world. So being able to allocate this expense to a customer project. And we can take it a step further and we can make it billable. So what that means is that we are actually going to invoice our customer for this expense directly. So when we choose that little billable, it will in the backend database create an uninvoiced AR for this customer. Okay, so that's just kind of high level. When it comes to the bill, we can do attachments. So if you want to attach the PDF copy of the bill, you can do that, or maybe an email. Maybe you got specialized discounts on these items and you want to put anything, you can do that. Inside the transaction, you can go ahead and pay bills if you wanted to. I'm going to actually show you the whole pay center, but you can, from any transaction, do the next step. Okay, so that's kind of just high level vendor setup when it comes to the bills side of things. So now let's talk about, the kind of, again, going back to that AP role. So kind of talk to you guys about setting up internal controls. We want to make sure that we have something set up so that we aren't duplicating our bills, altering any payment details. We want to make sure that we have the segregation of duties so that we aren't having the same person that enters the bills, approving and signing checks. There's also some people do the positive pay, so they send to the bank to help make sure that, it's not a fraudulent someone cashing the check that shouldn't be. So we can do that. That AP person also has to have good time management and workflow management. So we think about, being able to establish a management of time when it comes to entering bills, making sure that they're entered timely to make sure that we can take advantage of this discount if that's possible. They need to stay organized. So if you think of in the world of the three-way match, they want to make sure that they do follow the steps of, we're not paying a bill before we have actually got the product. So making sure we have everything that we need to actually process the payment. Okay, there's also batch processing. So if we are using an outside system and we have the information of our bills, we can batch enter bills or use an importing tool. Okay, and then the vendor communication. So, they have to build that strong vendor relationship. So making sure that if there's any kind of disputes or issues on, paying the bill, they have that relationship in place so that, it is handled quickly. Okay, a lot of times the AP person will be the person that negotiates payment terms. Okay, so you think of that, that's the person that's really helping you with your cash flow management by negotiating those discounts when possible or, adjusting payment terms. Okay, so kind of also, so let's go talk to the bill payment and go through that, and then we'll talk about the financial accuracy side of things. So coming back to my home screen, again, I can get to my pay bills here, or I can get to my pay bills here. Same exact workflow, whichever one you like. So you can see the default, what it shows you is every open bill that is due. You can put some filters in here, so show me on a due date, or you can filter it by a vendor if you only want to see a certain vendor. And you can see that it's going to give you information about the open bill. So this is different, not the date of the bill, but the date due. Okay, the vendor, the reference number. If we entered that discount date, we would see that in here. And then, of course, our amount due. If we had any credits with that vendor, when you select a vendor, it's going to populate down here so that you can attach a credit to it. And then you can change the amount you're going to pay. So in this case, if I wanted to, for Dave's business associate, if I just wanted to pay $2,000, I can change that. Okay. So again, you've got to have the trust in that AP role, the person in that role, to make decisions. How much are we going to pay? And hopefully that's an internal conversation, every week. Sometimes I see where the actual what's due for that week will get sent to the AP manager, and they make the decisions of what's going to be paid and the amount. But again, you're trusting that AP clerk AP role to follow through with that. Okay. So we can here choose the date we're going to pay, of course, the method we're going to pay, and the checking account that we're going to pay it from. So if you've got multiple, you can choose that. If you do have one, there is under the preferences where you can just choose a default, so you don't have to choose those every time. So that's kind of, how we process our bills. And then I want to go over to the report to show you the same information, but in the report style. So under reports and under vendor and payables, you have two reports, same information, summary and detail. And so when you think about this is the financial aspect of things. The AP person is responsible for making sure we are paying our bills in a timely manner. Okay, taking advantage of the discounts. They're also going to be responsible for making sure this information is accurate, because this is what we're reporting on our balance sheet that we owe as a liability as a company. It's very important when it comes to cash flow management that we have an accurate picture of what we owe and when we expect to pay it. Okay, so you can see here we've got two bills that are out in the 90 days. The expectation this shouldn't be here. Why is it here? Your AP person is going to be able to explain and tell you the why. They're going to, have information. I'm working with the vendor. We're doing a, payment plan, or maybe it's something and, hey, we got the bill, but we didn't have the products. We've agreed we're not paying this until then. I would kind of talk to them about changing the date, but whatever the issue or concern is, your AP person with their vendor relationships will be able to explain this. Okay, so they are going to be responsible for always reviewing and reconciling the AP ledger to the balance sheet, to the general ledger, to make sure it is accurate at all times. So they're going to, manage monitoring our outstanding payables. They're going to track recurring bills. So, sometimes we'll see, and I'm going to show you the balance sheet, for example. Actually, I'm going to switch over to the profit and loss. So recurring bills such as rent, utilities, subscriptions. Sometimes you don't get a monthly bill. And so that role is going to make sure that they are tracking those. They are making sure they are entered in the system every month so that we avoid mispaying it. They can take advantage of some memorized transactions. So for example, if we don't get a rent bill, they can set up a memorized bill, and that way it'll go ahead and create it at the first of every month to ensure that, one, we have accurate expense reporting, and two, we have the line of sight of paying that bill when it's due. Okay, so all this they're supporting the help around managing the forecast, cash flow forecasting, by providing that visibility on any upcoming bills that are coming due. Okay, so another key thing that sometimes we forget about, but it's a very important thing, is around our 1099 vendors. So they're responsible for ensuring that we have the proper documentations. We have our W-9 for our vendors. We have our 1099 reporting is accurate based on, the expense and the amount that changes every year. So again, this is very important that they have that up to date, that they're hitting the deadlines of when 1099 reporting is due. Okay. So I know I kind of talked to you guys about the 3-way match, but I want to kind of just go back to that. So they maintain and they're responsible for all the audit trails. So making sure that the bills match the POs, that the bills match the item receipt. So everything is in line. When we go to pay it, it is accurate. Okay. Another thing is, I've seen the AP role is responsible for the thresholds. So when we talk about purchasing major purchases, they're going to determine what should be a fixed asset versus what's going to be expense. They have to know what those thresholds are and, kind of start raising some, if we say our threshold is $500, but, we're purchasing things and we're constantly going over that, maybe we lower it. Maybe we reduce it. They would be responsible for bringing that up to management. Okay. Also, they're very good at suggesting process improvements. They're going to see where can we automate, where are some things that we can, using bank feeds, for example, using an invoice capturing software, using, like I was talking about, an importer tool. So they're going to be responsible for thinking through, what am I spending more time than I need to, and how can I improve and streamline the process? Okay. So kind of some soft skills. I always say, I told you guys, attention to detail, making sure every box is checked, the amounts match, we're hitting the due dates, we're paying as we should. The time management, making sure that we're getting everything in. The problem solving. So if we have an issue with the vendor, having the confidence and having the vendor relationships to solve those. And of course, it also takes teamwork, because if you think about it, you've got a purchase order, that's your inventory team, your purchasing team. They're going to work with the finance team when it comes to cash flow. So that AP person is supporting everyone, and what they're doing affects different departments. So there has to be teamwork. Okay. So last but not least, I'm going to, show you some more reporting. Under reports, you have vendors and you have purchases. So vendors and payables, as I showed you guys, you've got the summary. The detail is going to show you the same thing total wise as the summary, but it's going to show you the actual transactions that make up that summary. So we can sort it by name. So if you want it sorted by vendor, I can put them in alphabetical order. I can sort by due date so that, I have at the top what is due. So lots of different filters. I always tell clients, if you are wanting to customize reports, you want to run the detail. You don't have a lot of options of customization in a summary, but in a detailed report, I can add columns. I can filter. So if I just want to see a specific vendor instead of all of them, I can do it by the date. So there's a lot of different things that I can customize an AP report. If there's something that I am always looking back on, I can customize it and then take it a step further and actually memorize it so it's always there. Okay, coming back to reports, we've got vendor balance details. So kind of the same thing, but it basically just rolls it up to a name and a total. It doesn't have the details that you see over here in our summaries where it's showing you the buckets. It's just a summary. Okay. Coming down here, we've got our unpaid detail. So you can see that they're kind of the same. When it comes to the AP side of things, you kind of have, it's bills. It is unpaid bills. So every report is going back to that. What is that liability that we owe to each vendor? And so this is just another way to look at it to see our unpaid bills. This is doing it by vendor and showing underneath each bill and what the total is we owe them. And this is date driven. So this is what we have as of the 15th of December. Let's look at our graph. So if we like graphs, we can see it here. And this is, again, just a different way to look at the same information, the same data on not only it breaks it down by that bucket of when they're due, but it also is putting them in a graph of who do we owe the most. So for example, our vendor material is our biggest chunk that we owe. So this is when it goes back to that cash flow management. Maybe this is the one we need to focus on because we need to bring that balance down. So this is where we're going to say, okay, we've got, a big project coming in. And so when we get the, customer deposit for that, we're going to work on paying our material vendors down to get them, in a smaller balance. Okay. Let's see, we've got a few more here. Again, here's our 1099 summary. This is driven by your setup. So when it comes back to our vendor setup, let's just go and edit this guy. This is driven from here on our tax setting to say they are eligible for 1099, then it will populate on that report. Okay, I'm going to show you under purchases. So this is just a little bit different because this was focusing on the liability. Who do we owe? Now the purchasing side is when you just want to see what we've purchased. So it's not necessarily based on what's outstanding, but who we actually have purchased from and what we've purchased. Okay, so you can see we can do it by vendor or we can do it by item. And then if we do have open purchase orders, most of the time, this is not the AP role to review this. This is going to be more of the purchasing side, the inventory management. But I think it would be a great kind of part of collaboration, teamwork, to make it part of our month-end close review, to make sure that we haven't missed any bills, that we have purchase orders sitting out. Okay, so we are right at time. I hope this kind of shared some light on other functions of the AP role, not just bill paying. Thank you guys as always for joining me, and have a good rest of your week.